When I came into this group, I was very apprehensive about talking about grief at all, and certainly about talking about it in a group. At first it was overwhelming, you know, being in the group and having everyone talk about their grief, and I was like, oh no, this is gonna be really hard. And then I found as we continued on that being with the group was really, really powerful, much more powerful than working one-on-one with someone. Over time, it just became easier. I think it was because everybody else was sharing, and that created a safe environment. And it did feel like we were all in like a big hug. Like it was a very, very safe environment. We were enclosed and safe. And then I did open up, and trust became quite easy, and it was very easy for me to share with others. So I definitely walked in day one, not knowing if I was going to do it, not knowing if I was going to be able to trust or open up. And then as the weeks progressed, I would definitely completely opened up and was willing to share anything and everything, as was everybody else in the group. So it just became an almost undescribable safe cocoon experience. Well, the interesting thing about the journal for me was that I found it very important for myself to want to keep everything that I could in one place. So when we did projects or journaling or had handouts, and even emails, we communicated over email sometimes, I didn't want that stuff scattered around. I needed it to be all in one spot. So it's all in here, and it's all incorporated. And it's very precious to me. Out of the projects that we did in Good Grief, I think one of the most potent ones, which is also looks like the most simple, was the weaving. And this is what I made, and this was kind of the process. So what we did is we would take our loss line. So this is representing different experiences in our life. So this is where we would experience loss. So we would take a string and place it, and it would represent a life experience where we experience loss. And then we would take these other strings, which represented light, our true self, the truth of who we are, our spirit, and then we would weave it in through all of the loss. And that was a huge lesson for me itself, but then bringing it into this experience of doing something physically with my hands brought it into a different level. I always had this idea that loss was about getting over it. Getting over it, pretending it didn't happen, ignoring it, or, you know, resolving it and then it's gone. But this experience was more, no, you embrace it. You embrace it and you weave it in along with the light. And that was very powerful. The weaving was a very powerful lesson for me. It was very revolutionary and different from anything that I'd ever learned before. So what's different here is we take the darkness so it no longer controls us in our subconscious. We look at it and see all the different angles, and then we pour love on it. And we put it on our altar and we honor it. And that is a very different experience for me than any of the other work that I've done. I really took off with the personal mythology and the invitation to write and to create stories. Finding my myths. It was like going on an archaeological dig. And we were constantly doing these different practices, and all of these different myths would pop up. And it was interesting, it wasn't just one, there was quite a slew of them. And then there was one that I found for me that was the predominant myth of, you know, my early childhood, what I can hear reverberating in the back of my head even when I don't pay attention. So finding all of these myths was incredibly empowering, and then weaving them into a story was a really wonderful way to begin to explore where they came from, why they're there, what it is they're trying to teach me. I think it was our last lesson that we did that was the most powerful for me, that really brought the whole experience together. And that was when we held our myth in one hand and our counter myth in the other hand. And then we brought them together and experienced the center point and it wasn't a negating of either. It was an honoring of both. And then a bringing them together to where we realize that both are true. It's not either or, it's and. I've always had a tendency to think where I'm always supposed to live in the light and everything's always supposed to be happy and it's all supposed to be good. And if there's darkness, we just push that away. And this was like, no, we don't stay in the dark and suffer, but we don't live in the light and pretend there is no darkness. It's both. It's an honoring of both. And that has been, I think, what has stuck with me the most. The guided meditations rocked my world. They were pretty amazing. And it was interesting because it was just so subtle. You know, we would just sit or lay quietly and Darlene would guide us through the meditation. And it just seemed so simple. But my spirit just dove into those meditations. I had amazing experiences. So I really loved working with the art. It was really powerful for me. I tend to work more with words in my life. I like to journal and write, so I'm used to working with words. But working with images opened up a different part of my mind, a different room, brought new things to light, and gave me material to work with that was different than if I just worked with words. So I've done a lot of spiritual paths and journeys through my life, but I found Good Grief to be particularly powerful for me because it took everything I thought I knew and brought it into a new light.